Hey guys, most of you probably know me as a top Scrabble Grandmaster and a Scrabble content creator, but in today's video, I want to talk about a different word-related pursuit I spend a lot of my time on, namely constructing crossword puzzles. There are a lot of similarities between Scrabble and crosswords. The most obvious one is probably that both of them require all of their entries to be valid and intersect in a grid-like pattern. In Scrabble, being valid simply means being in the Scrabble dictionary. With crosswords, it's a little bit different as there's not a standardized dictionary, and you can use multi-word phrases as well as proper nouns, but generally speaking, all entries in a crossword grid should be recognizable to the general public. Additionally, the most common size of a crossword puzzle is 15 by 15, which is the same size as a Scrabble board. There is some flexibility with crosswords, but for instance, the Monday through Saturday puzzles that are published in the New York Times are almost exclusively 15 by 15 puzzles. And finally, if you weren't already convinced, the formal name of Scrabble is actually not Scrabble, it's SCRABBLE Brand Crossword Game. So there really are a lot of similarities between these two things. So since all of my subscribers are presumably fans of Scrabble and Scrabble and crosswords are so similar, I wanted to tell you guys about some of the puzzles I've worked on creating as well as the monthly contest I help run, since I think you guys will find it really interesting and might even enjoy giving it a shot yourselves. The crossword contest I help run is called the Muller Monthly Music Meta, or MMMM for short. It was founded by Pete Muller, a renowned crossword constructor, over 10 years ago. And the fun fact is that Pete is actually quite a good Scrabble player himself and competed in multiple tournaments in the early 2000s. I've been working with Pete for almost 2 years and it's been super fun and I've learned a ton from working with him, so I'm really excited to be taking more of an active role in constructing the puzzles for 2024. We actually just published our first puzzle contest of the year, and it's a super fun puzzle called Take a Change on Me. I'm not going to spoil the answer as the contest is live, but I will provide a link in the description. You guys should definitely go check it out. Now, it's probably no surprise given the name of the contest that this puzzle, along with pretty much all of the puzzles we publish at the beginning of each month, are music themed in some way. That being said, you certainly do not have to have a ton of knowledge about music or be a big music fan to enjoy and succeed at these puzzles. The last part of the contest name, the meta part, is probably the part that's unfamiliar to most people, but it's also the most interesting part and the part I want to spend the rest of this video discussing. The way I like to think about metas as far as crosswords go is a sort of puzzle within the puzzle. With a traditional crossword, once you've finished filling in the entire grid, then you're done. But that's only the first step for a meta puzzle. With meta puzzles, once you've finished filling in the grid, you still have to extract something further, known as the meta, from either the grid, the clues, the theme entries, or the title, or more often than not, some combination of all of those. The beauty of metas is there's no hard and fast rule for how you're supposed to extract a meta from a completed grid, and trying to come up with fun and creative meta mechanisms is a super enjoyable and complex part of the construction process. Since the mechanisms for extracting metas from completed grids are so varied, I think the best way to illustrate what I'm talking about and why these puzzles are so fun to both create and play is with a few examples. The first example I have here is actually not a puzzle I created. It's taken from a primer on how meta puzzles work, published by the Wall Street Journal, which still runs a very popular meta contest every Friday. As you guys can see, they've already given us the completed grid as well as a bit of a hint highlighting 5 different strings of letters in green. If we look closer, we notice that these highlighted strings of letters are all at the beginning of the longest entries of the puzzle, which we often refer to as the theme entries or themers for short. And certainly not always, but often the themers do hold the key to figuring out what the meta is, and this puzzle is no exception. So with all of this in mind and the fact that the meta is a world capital, see if you guys can pause the video and figure out what the meta to this puzzle is. So for those of you who got it, well done, and for those of you who just want to see how it works, let's think about how each of these strings of letters are pronounced. Going from top to bottom, we have Q, U, I, T, O, and it turns out all of those are individual letters. If I put them here, then we quickly see that this spells out the capital of Ecuador, namely Quito, which is the meta answer to this puzzle. So keeping in mind this example and our new understanding of metas, let's now take a look at some of my favorite puzzles from the Muller Monthly Music Meta that we put out earlier this year. The first MMMM puzzle I want to show you guys is called O Canada, and we published it in February of 2023. It's fairly easy as far as our meta puzzles go. Generally, we try to publish easier puzzles early in the year and then gradually build up the difficulty as the year goes on. I'm not providing the clues for this puzzle here, and I generally won't be unless there are specific clues relevant to the meta, because I want to focus more on the meta element of extracting the meta from the completed grid, as opposed to the traditional crossword element of solving the grid from scratch with the clues, which I presume most if not all of you are familiar with. So with that in mind, here is the completed grid for this puzzle, and the meta, as you can see on the top left, is a hit 70s song from a Canadian artist. So with this info, I'll give you guys another opportunity if you'd like to pause the video and try to figure out the meta for yourself. For those of you who were able to solve it, very well done. And for those of you who want a hint, the key here is going to be, just like in the Wall Street Journal example we looked at, to pay attention to the themers or longest words in the grid. Now in this case, the themers turn out to be vertical. This is in contrast to the Wall Street Journal example where the themers were horizontal. More often than not with these puzzles, the themers will be horizontal, but as this example illustrates, that's certainly not always the case, so it's important to have an open mind when looking for themers. Here the 5 theme entries are Ducks Under, Says Uncle, Gordon Lightfoot, A Tatsu Niece, and Unsung Hero. So now the question becomes, what do these theme entries have in common, and how might that lead us to the meta? Let's start with the central theme entry, and also the longest one, 6 down, which is Gordon Lightfoot. This is probably relevant because Gordon Lightfoot was a Canadian singer, and the meta is a hit 70s song from a Canadian artist. So now a logical next step, especially if you're not that familiar with Gordon Lightfoot's music, might be to Google some of his biggest hits. It's worth mentioning that unlike when solving traditional crossword puzzles, where Googling is generally frowned upon, it's completely acceptable when solving meta puzzles, at least once you've already completed the whole grid. And the reason is because solving metas is a multi-step and creative process. So I can't just take a completed grid, put it into Google, and be like, hey Google, here's the grid, what's the meta to this puzzle? Google simply is not going to be able to tell me. That's in stark contrast to if I'm solving a traditional puzzle, and let's say there's a clue that's referencing a person or some other thing that I'm not familiar with. More often than not, I can just put that clue into Google, and it's going to tell me what the answer is. And that certainly takes away from the enjoyment and fairness of trying to solve that kind of puzzle. So now, back to the task at hand. If I Googled Gordon Lightfoot's biggest hits, I might have come across the song Sundown, which he released in 1974. And now if I look more closely at the 4 remaining theme entries, I also notice that the word sun is actually hidden in the middle of all of them. So combining that and the fact that these theme entries are all down entries as opposed to across entries, which as I mentioned earlier is slightly unusual for themers, I do indeed see that Sundown is the meta to this puzzle. The next example I want to show you guys is super fun, but it's considerably harder than the first one. We published it in September of 2023. It's called Forest Sight, and the meta is a famous singer. Here's the completed grid. I'm going to give you some more information. The clues to 15 down and 45 down. They're a linked pair of clues. The clue to 15 down is with 45 down, park structures usually constructed from timber. And the clue for 45 down is just see 15 down. Now, I'm pointing out timber because this should trigger alarm bells as a crossword solver. I could have just used the word wood in the clue, which is much more commonplace and would have been a lot simpler. You normally wouldn't say that something is made of timber. You'd say that it's made of wood or wooden. So this is a little bit strange, and these kind of strange clues should always trigger a red flag whenever you're trying to solve a meta. And that combined with the forest in the title is going to be very relevant. So with this information, I will give you guys an opportunity to pause the video and see if you can solve this meta. For those of you who got it, congratulations. I am very impressed as this was one of the hardest metas of the year. And for those of you who just want to see how it works, the key here is to hone in on different kinds of wood or trees hidden in the puzzle, which is indicated by forest in the title as well as that timber clue I was talking about before. There aren't really traditional themers in this puzzle like there were in the other ones because there are no words that are particularly long or stand out because of their length. So the next step here is to identify 6 different times in this puzzle where a wood is hidden in an across entry. We have pine, fir, oak, ash, elm, and teak. Now we're not done yet. The fact that 15 and 45 down make picnic tables gives us yet another hint. And picnic tables are sort of shaped like an upside down U. And what happens if we turn these different woods into upside down U's? We now highlight the legs, so to speak, of each of these picnic tables, and we notice something very interesting. For each of these picnic tables, the 2 legs are the same letter. And if we spell these out going from top to bottom, we get the name Carrie, C-A-R-R-I-E. So at this point, you guys probably guessed it because the name Carrie is under all of these wooden picnic tables. The answer to this puzzle, the meta, is Carrie Underwood. And now you guys see why that clue used timber and not wood. If we had used wood, then that would be duplicitous with Carrie Underwood's last name. And that is a big no-no when it comes to cluing meta puzzles. The final example I want to go over is another fun but fairly tricky meta from a puzzle we published in August of 2023 called Hope Springs Eternal. The meta for this puzzle is a famous rock song. Here's the completed grid, and I'm going to give you guys some additional information. Hesiod, 33 down, is clued as ancient Greek poet, and box, 37 across, is clued as container associated with a famous poem by 33 down. I'm also going to point out that hope in the title is particularly relevant to this meta. And something that should catch your eye is the clue for box. For a word as simple and common as box, this clue is particularly convoluted, involving a cross-reference with 33 down Hesiod. There are many much simpler and more straightforward ways to clue box. So kind of like in the last example where we saw timber being used in a clue instead of the much more straightforward wood, the fact that this clue is so seemingly needlessly complicated should definitely raise eyebrows. And indeed, it is very relevant to the meta. So for now, I'll leave it at that. I'll once again give you guys an opportunity to pause the video if you want to try to solve the meta on your own from here. Once again, congratulations to everybody who solved it, and for those of you who just want to see how it works, the key point to notice is that the box being clued in a somewhat roundabout manner in 37 across is actually none other than Pandora's box. And how would you figure this out? Well, number one, the convoluted clue I mentioned in 37 across is referring back to 33 down, which is Hesiod. And Pandora's box was mentioned in Hesiod's poem Works and Days. And not only that, hope, which I mentioned was relevant in the title, refers to the fact that hope was the last thing remaining in Pandora's box after all of the evils had sprung out. Now, deducing that the box refers to Pandora's box is certainly a big step, but we're still a long ways away from solving the meta. Just like in the previous example, there aren't really any words that stand out as themers just by virtue of their length. So we need to look elsewhere for the Pandora's box that's hidden in this puzzle. Or possibly the multiple Pandora's boxes. It turns out there's not one, not two, but 7 Pandora's boxes subtly hidden within this puzzle, and I'm going to reveal where they are on the next slide. And here they are. As you guys can see, each so-called Pandora's box is a 3x3 square containing 9 letters. Pandora's, which is 8 letters long, goes around the perimeter of each of these boxes, leaving the 9th letter in the middle. And if we look at what the 9th letters are, all of the letters that are sort of inside these Pandora's boxes, and then read left to right and then top to bottom, we see that they spell out D-R-E-A-M-O-N, which is Dream On, a very famous hit by Aerosmith, which is indeed the meta answer to this puzzle. And what I think is super cool about this meta and the meta answer is that Dream On actually happens to be on Aerosmith's compilation album called Pandora's Box. So just another layer that I think was a really cool part of this meta construction. So that's about it, guys. If you found these fun and interesting, which I really hope you did, I'd strongly encourage you to go check out these puzzles and sign up for the monthly contest. I'll post a link on the right-hand side of my screen here, as well as in the description below. And as I mentioned earlier, the first contest of the year is live, and January is when things start off the easiest, so now is a great time to dip your feet in and get immersed in this world of meta crosswords, so I highly encourage you guys to check it out. If you do check it out, please let me know what you think of the puzzles. And yeah, I think that's it, guys. So thanks so much for watching the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you all soon for the next one. Bye-bye.